This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. Here's your host, Corey Tusik.
This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Corey Tusik. Today, my guest is Knut Svanholm. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my last name is Tusik, but everybody usually says like Tukik, Tuchek, everything like that. So I'm used to it. Yeah. Which ironically, where my family's from in the Czech Republic, Tuchek is correct. So when people nail it, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Over there, it's like Smith compared to what, like Smith in the United States, everybody's named Smith, but it's common over there. So anyways, if you're listening in the Czech Republic, we might be related. But Knut is the author of Sovereignty Through Mathematics and Independence Reimagined. Also just a staunch Bitcoiner, a big proponent of freedom. And I'm a big fan of that. So I thought it'd be great to have a chat. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, anytime. So I have to start with asking you about the painting. If you're listening to this, behind him is the Citadel 21 framed. You said this is Hodlnaut's magazine.
Yeah, it's sort of a fanzine for the Bitcoin plebs write their stories. It's bi-monthly now, and this is from issue 2. Where I had I had an article featured in that issue, and this artist, Cypherpunk Now, nice. made this, and he made 21 prints, one for each character on the painting here.
Oh, cool!
So I'm over there. I think I'm over there.
That's you.
And it says this is number 11 out of 21, dedicated to BTC writers, specifically Knut Svanholm. So I'm really I had to frame it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful piece. His art is very original.
I was going to say it is very unique. And I think it's a good representation of Martin
Fisher is his real name.
Martin Fisher.
I just doxed him. Anyway, he made more prints, but he burned the leftover ones, so there were only 21 left. Yeah,
I wonder where he got that idea.
Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah, that's a cool idea, though. Yeah, that's something. Maybe there's a business proposition I'll have to share with you off air because I don't want anybody else to steal it. But I had this really unique idea I'll have to share with you afterwards. Maybe.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah. That's called a tease, I think, in the radio business. I'm not in the radio business at all. So
you are now.
Yeah, I guess so.
You're making a pod.
Yeah, I guess that's what this is what radio is nowadays. It used to be everything. Had the pukey DJ with coming back to you from top hits from the 80s, 90s, and today. Yeah, I think they call it the pukey DJ, where they sound like they're like about to throw up the whole time. But anyways, so. Thanks for coming on. And, there's a lot of things I want to get into with you. But one thing I've been doing, because I'm aiming this at the class of 2020, 2021. I mean, this is welcome to anybody as well. But I think I started off asking people, how explain Bitcoin to me like I'm 5. I got into it. I've been paying attention to it for years, but I actually invested early last year and but I can still use that refresher. But I've also found that it's very interesting to hear other people's perspectives of explain Bitcoin in its simplest terms. And what does it mean to you?
That's the tricky part, isn't it? Explaining complex things in simple terms. But I'll give it my best shot. After all, that's somewhat akin to what I try to do in my books. Mm-hmm. the first thing you have to ask yourself is, what is money? And you really try to figure out what money is. And it's not as simple as it seems, because pretty early on, when trying to figure out what money is, you encounter an entity called the central bank, and the fact that they can conjure up new money out of thin air and lend it out to people, and expect the loans to be paid back with interest. In reality, it's not only the central banks that do this, but all banks. They can. We live under a system called fractional reserve banking, which basically means that the banks can lend out more money than they have in their vaults, than what they have in the vaults. And this started back in the days of the Hansa trades in Europe, when it probably started earlier than that too. But when paper money was introduced, people deposited their gold in a bank vault, and they got a receipt back, and that's the start of the bill, or a paper currency. And when the banker realized that he could print more bills than he actually had gold in the vault, because the risk that everyone would like to withdraw their gold at the same time was very low. He realized that after a while, so the banker started to print out more notes than he actually had gold, and which meant he could lend out more money than he had, and people had to pay him back with interest, which made the banker very rich. And we're still living under that system today. And Bitcoin tries to solve this problem by introducing a new type of money, which is akin to gold, even though I think all metaphors for Bitcoin are somewhat misleading, because I think that Bitcoin is vastly better than gold in almost all aspects of it, because you can verify that the system works. The main feature of Bitcoin is that it has a limited supply cap, which will reach around the year 2140, when the last fraction of a Bitcoin will be mined, and there will never be any more than slightly below 21 million Bitcoins around, which themselves can be divided into 100 million parts each, and even further than that using layer 2 solutions such as the Lightning Network. And right here, I realize that I'm not using layman's terms at all.
No. It's,
but
it's okay.
Think of it as collectible trading cards, which you can verify the total amount of. So you know that there's only 21 million cards around in the world and at all times. And therefore, it's akin to a collectible in that it's scarce and verifiably so. And furthermore, you can check that the system works yourself, and you don't require a middleman to exchange Bitcoins with other people. It's purely peer-to-peer, which means that you're only using software to trade the Bitcoins between people.
Like Napster.
Like Napster. And there are tools to use which enables you to not even have to use software. You can put them on a hardware wallet or an open dime, which is a USB stick with a one-time USB stick with some Bitcoins on it. You can even print out paper wallets and trade those. And you can do all sorts of things. You can even memorize what's called a seed phrase, which is a Bitcoin wallet boiled down to 24 words from a specific dictionary. And if you can memorize 24 words, you can you can walk around with as much money as you can imagine in your head, as long as you have those Bitcoin. But this blurs out the line between knowing and owning, which I think is a very fascinating part of the Bitcoin rabbit hole, which we haven't explored but a fraction of yet. And it's also a leaderless system, so there's no one in charge of what happens to the Bitcoin network, because the nodes of the network vote or what software they choose to run is what determines what Bitcoin is in the long run. And there's a consensus mechanism. We all work together to make the system function the way it's supposed to function. Mm-hmm. So it's like an absolutely scarce collectible that is also teleportable and censorship resistant. No one can stop you from sending Bitcoin to anyone else on the entire planet, and it has no borders, and it's pseudonymous, which means that it can be anonymous if you know what you're doing, but it can also be they can also be traced. Every transaction is forever encapsulated in the
blockchain in
cryptographic amber forever on the internet. Like
that's a good way to put it. Cryptographic amber. I like that.
Yeah. So that's the basic thing that it is. And when I first discovered it, it intrigued me, and it has kept intriguing me ever since. What was that? Sorry.
What year did you discover it, or come around to it?
Around with 2013, 2014.
And you went down the rabbit hole, and
not directly. I took a course in 2016, an online course, and after that I was granted a what's that called when you get I was one of the top students, so I had a large discount to collect for doing a master's degree in digital currencies, which I didn't do because I thought it would be a waste of time and money. After all, I'm 45 this year, so I don't really have time for master's degrees anymore.
Yeah, but once you find out that freedom of you get free of academia, you realize it's not.
And furthermore, it was quite costly, and I thought I might as well use whatever money I can spare to just buy Bitcoin instead, and see what happens to them, and see if I can contribute somehow, because I was so intrigued by this. So I started writing while working as a captain on a small crew transfer vessel in an offshore wind farm.
Okay.
So, which meant that we went out to wind turbine, and we had some technicians on board that cleaned the wing of the turbine. So we just let them up. They climbed up and hang by rope.
Wow.
On a turbine, and we moored to another turbine close by, and just waited for them to call us in the afternoon so we could go back to the port again. Which meant that I had a lot of spare time and not a lot to do, and the internet connection was crap out in the wind farm anyway. So I can't really sit still. So I started writing after getting bored with all the games on my phone.
Uh-huh.
And that's how my hobby career of
becoming an author,
not so slowly and not so surely becoming an author all of a sudden. So yeah,
well, that's awesome. And one of the things I want to get into the hardware wallets and stuff like that as well. But one of the things you said early on is something I don't think a lot of people even know much about, and that's the fractional reserve spending or lending. Because that plus quantitative easing, I've said before, those are the things that when I found out about them, I mean, I literally cashed in 401ks, everything all in to Bitcoin. I didn't even, I mean, it was, to me at that point, I was like, oh my God, this fiat system is a sinking ship and I got to get off. So could you explain that, you know, like, I mean, I guess the question I'm asking is it really just they're creating new money? Like that it's a form of money printing, the fractional reserve lending, right?
Yeah. But it's more complex than that. I mean, when central banks issue new currency, they usually do it by trading it for government bonds. And government bonds are a promise from the government that they will pay the loan back at some point, which they of course never will, because there are like 4 countries in the world that don't have a national debt. So the whole system is built around debt. And there are some arguments for why this would work. It's a system first proposed by an economist called John Maynard Keynes, who's infamous in Bitcoin circles, and like the type of economy that or economic school of thought that Bitcoin builds on is the Austrian school, popularized by Ludwig von Mises, who's written an excellent book on economics called Human Action, which was written in the middle of the last century and has been like it's a great piece of it's a masterpiece of knowledge in economics, and it has been in the dark for quite a while, but it's becoming quite popular again. It's a dense book, and it's a long book, and quite a hard read. But well worth your time. If you have 38 hours to spend, I would recommend listening to Human Action, the audiobook.
That's a pretty long book.
There's so many insights in that, and it's perfectly explained to me. I read this for the first time like 2 years ago, but it really put the finger on what I think a lot of people walk around suspecting that something is wrong with the system. And this perfectly put the last nail in the coffin for my belief in the current system we live under, finally. So I can really recommend that book.
Yeah.
I try to another way of the thing with Bitcoin now is I think people still have a hard time believing that it can have any type of longevity. They still believe that it has reached its top and it's going down. But the thing when you really grasp what it is and what it does, you see that it really can't go down in value, because it will drive out everything else. And that's why I have this little logo here on my T-shirt, everything divided by 21 million. That's where we're headed. If you can, if the entire world economy comes into Bitcoin, we will live in a very different world. And I don't know when or even if that will happen, because it's hard to foresee the future.
Oh yeah.
But I spend a lot of time and a lot of thoughts on trying to imagine what that would look like and how it would play out and what would happen and why it would happen and why it's likely. And I try to debunk the idea of Bitcoin all the time, but the more you learn about it, the harder it is to see any other possible future scenario play out. Yeah, I mean, you get more and more convinced the more the deeper you fall into the rabbit hole, everyone who actually knows something about Bitcoin knows what I mean when I say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's the opposite for people that are into, that are attacking Bitcoin, is that they never challenge their own belief system. But I found that something common between Bitcoiners is that they're constantly like trying to double check and make sure and look through, like, okay, is there any holes in this system? And then they come out with a stronger conviction. So you met something you mentioned about everything being, the logo on your shirt, and then you have I listened to the Guy Swan narration of everything divided by 21 million.
And you see the video?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And I think Hal Finney, didn't he early on say that it could be like if everything was divided by 21 million in the world, it would be like every Bitcoin would be worth like $10 million or something like that.
Yeah. Hal Finney said a lot of things very early on. For instance, he's the one that first mentioned that trying to copy this technology would be futile because resistance to being copied is what it's all about. Like everything on a computer can be copied very easily, but Bitcoin cannot. And this is why a lot of people have a hard time believing how this system could even exist, because it's sort of like the invention of a time machine, which is also impossible to wrap your head around. And you think it's impossible. And the time machine is probably very likely still impossible. But Bitcoin, digital scarcity, was apparently not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And if things hadn't played out the way they did for Bitcoin, if Satoshi hadn't disappeared, and if the experiment would have failed somewhere along the way, like if during the fork to Bitcoin Cash in 2017,
mm-hmm.
if that would have played out in another way than it did, then the experiment might have actually failed and faded into nothing, and then you couldn't have replicated it because every subsequent attempt would also have failed,
mm-hmm.
Because you could never have reached a point of decentralization, which is a crucial aspect of why it works. And decentralization is much harder to achieve than people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of things claim to be decentralized, but they're not.
And that mainly comes from the proof of work, right? And having all the nodes running around the world, all keeping track of the same ledger.
Yeah, partly from the proof of work. Like other blockchains have proof of work too, but that proof isn't really a proof of anything, because they aren't decentralized. They can still be influenced by whatever their inventor says is the correct path forward, and so on. And they're
so yeah, you could like Ethereum, like kind of have a problem, and then Vitalik like went in and kind of flushed something out. I heard something about that.
The DAO incident was the first such thing that happened in Ethereum, but they're also not only from a technical perspective, but from an economic perspective, which is more important. They can't be decentralized because you can make infinite copies of Bitcoin, which dilutes the value of every other coin. So over time, the other coins will diminish in value compared to Bitcoin, and therefore they can easily be attacked at some point in the future. It doesn't really matter what price they have at the moment, or how people value them now. It's the long term. like with the shit coins, as we call them, which is everything that isn't Bitcoin. The point is you trade them for each other, and you try to hop onto the train that is moving faster than all the other trains. So you try to like no one would hold on to a doggy coin if there were if they suddenly started losing value, and if there was a big bear market. You need hodlers of last resort and core believers in the system in order for it to work. And only Bitcoin has that. Only Bitcoin has the potential to be forever, because it was the first one, and because it was like the first attempt at digital scarcity achieved through decentralized consensus that actually worked. And the first mover advantage here is absolutely crucial for the thing to work.
Yeah,
so
I think, I was going to say, I think being the first mover, but also happening to be a flawless. Like I'm curious. I wonder sometimes if something like Ethereum had come out and caught some traction, but then Bitcoin came out and it was the perfected version. But
Bitcoin is far from flawless.
Oh, elaborate on that, because I mean I know that it is an engineering marvel. A lot of people think it's it's spectacular, but where are there holes that could make it dangerous?
I'm not very technical, but I know that there are aspects of the system that could have been done better from the beginning, and that could have been avoided, but that are already in the system, and you can't change the system. You can only do minor changes because you need a consensus in order to upgrade Bitcoin. Bitcoin can be upgraded, but never through a hard fork. A hard fork cannot happen in Bitcoin again. Only soft forks can happen, which means that a hard fork is when every node needs to run the updated version. This is also a simplification of the terms. But a hard fork, in order for that to work, everyone needs to upgrade their software. And with a soft fork, it's backwards compatible, so you can run the old software as well.
Okay, so you could have a node that maybe it was from 2012 or 13. In 50 years, it'll still work.
Yeah, I on top of my head, I can't say when the last hard fork in Bitcoin was, but I believe that hard forks that we've seen the last one, and we won't see hard forks ever again in Bitcoin.
Okay. So with of
course, I can't know that, but what I can know is the game theory that it builds upon, and that all the incentives, the incentive structure of the system prohibits unnecessary change and too much change, and like that is so embedded in the system at this point. So there's no one really wants to change it because there's too much risk. After all, this is a $1 trillion market now, so the value of the system is so no one would like to jeopardize that. So you can never reach a consensus in like, oh, we need to change this thing in a drastic way. You can, if an improvement proposal. Improvement proposals or BIPs have to be so good that everyone agrees that it's a good idea to improve the protocol.
Now, in your theory of everything being divided by 21 million, I'm curious as to what your vision is. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to ask you. I thought, you have thought about this a lot, obviously. And there was a thread, I forget who it was, so I'm not going to be able to properly cite them, that somebody was talking about why they're bullish on Bitcoin always. And at the end of the thread, it was kind of like the possibility of a utopian future. What do you see the everything being divided by 21 million result? What would that look like? Just in your opinion, you're not for. You don't have to. You don't have to do Confucius or or.
No, but this requires quite a long explanation.
Sure, go for it.
What we live in now, the Keynesian system of ever inflating currencies, the theory is that the central bank needs to make sure that a currency keeps the prices are stable, so that and that we have around 2% inflation every year, so in order for people to keep buying stuff, because according to Keynesian theory, the value comes from many transactions. So each time we transact with each other, we both benefit. One gets paid and the other gets a product or a service. And the more products and services there are in circulation, or in other words, the faster the system goes, the better it is. In this, this is the Keynesian mindset, that every transaction is a good transaction. And the Austrian viewpoint is that only sound transactions matter, like transactions that are the only thing that actually drives the economy forward is good investment. And in order for an investment to be good, it can't be just frivolous shit that we buy from China all the time. It has to be something of substance. And this price stability that we're seeing is a facade. It's not the real thing, because the production cost of every commodity in the world, or every good in the world, is lowered drastically year by year, because we get better at manufacturing, we get better at transporting, we get better at extracting energy, we get better at everything. So the prices of every product there is going down over time, and mass-produced things are approaching zero, their actual cost. But we've been fooled into believing that they cost about the same every year, while prices should be going down. And the thing is that the cheapest thing there is to produce is money, because all it takes is a guy pushing a button on a computer, like enter. and new zero. Money is conjured out of thin air. And it used to be, I think, still electronics or hard drives are still outpacing money in the cost per year, in the cost per year race. So a gigabyte is cheaper and cheaper every year still, even though, and that's the only thing that keeps the same
pace.
Pace as money. So the prices should be going down. And if you think about this, if you buy a house, that house usually goes up in value over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Because a house, it shouldn't go up in value just buying a house and holding on to it, because the house deteriorates, and the houses are not forever. Mm-hmm. They may last for 100 years, but that's still a short amount of time in the long run. So your house shouldn't go up in value; it should go down in value, because houses are also cheaper and cheaper to produce, and but nobody ever reflects on this, because they think they win if they own a house and they can sell it for more money than they bought it for. But they didn't really do that. But the only thing that happened is that their money lost their value. So money has a price, and since we measure everything in dollars, we get our view of the world and how we look at prices is completely wrong. And Bitcoin is completely the opposite of that. It's the other way around. It's the most expensive thing to produce there is, and it gets more expensive over time because of something called the difficulty adjustment algorithm. The system works so that imagine. How should I put this? Finding a good metaphor quickly here, but. The more energy that is put into the Bitcoin system, the harder it gets to find the next Bitcoin. If you do the same for gold or for oil or for any other commodity or natural resource, when the price goes up, more resources are allocated to finding more of the thing, which means that we do find more of the thing, which makes the price go down again. And for gold, there's quite a high stock of gold in comparison to the flow of new gold that is. So if the price of gold goes up, a lot more gold miners start to mine gold, but they don't find that much gold, so it doesn't affect the price that much again. But with Bitcoin, you can't find Bitcoin faster by pouring more resources into it. Or the entire system can't, because the more miners there are, the more mining power there is, the harder it gets to find the next Bitcoin. It recalibrates every 2 weeks, and it gets harder and harder to find the next Bitcoin. And it's often mismarketed in mainstream media, like these giant computers solving really difficult math problems. But they're not really solving difficult math problems. They're just trying to guess a number a great many times. They're trying to find a hash beginning with a hash of a Bitcoin block, which begins with a certain amount of zeros. Or trying to.
So they're basically starting at 0 and going to 1, 2, 3, 4, and just doing it as fast as they can until they hit.
Not really. They're guessing random numbers.
Not sequentially, but
yeah. I think I can explain this quite well. First of all, a hashing algorithm does one thing. It compiles a file into a string of characters, like both letters and numbers. And in Bitcoin, that's Bitcoin uses mainly a hashing algorithm called the SHA-256, which turns a Bitcoin block into such a string of numbers, like 30 characters in a row. And you can very easily verify that a hash is valid or correct or correctly represents a Bitcoin block by doing the reverse calculation. It's very hard to do the calculation one way, but it's very easy to do it the other way. So it's easy to verify, but impossible to forge a fake version of. So that's the basis. The basis of the system, and the more miners there are that try to find this number, you include a random number in the Bitcoin block, and then you hash it, and then you come up with you just guess the number and hope that it turns out to be the correct Bitcoin block when you reverse the mathematics. And the difficulty adjustment algorithm makes sure that the average time that it says that it takes to find the next Bitcoin block is always 10 minutes. So it's based on probability. So sometimes it can take like 30 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever to find the next block. And sometimes you find the next block instantly. But on average, it takes 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, that's amazing. That's so you can't just sit there and randomly guess a 30-digit code and like a one in a billion shot.
You could. What you do is you have your Bitcoin block and you add the random number, and then you run the hashing algorithm, and that you get another number, and that number has to start with a certain amount of zeros. This is very simplified, but. So you could actually just take a Bitcoin block, which you claim to be the next block. You make sure that everything that's in the mempool is there, and the reward to yourself is there, and everything. And you just write down a random number, and you can actually Bitcoin mine by hand. but it's of course you wouldn't. Yeah, of course you wouldn't find the next block, because the odds of you doing that are so like we're on petahashes now, and that's like this network is the world's largest computer. Mm-hmm. So this computer, it takes up about as much energy as a small country like Switzerland. And I wrote a tweet about that recently, that Bitcoin uses about as much energy as Switzerland. So it's a waste of energy, and it's used for nothing. So we should ban Switzerland immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I would like to see the carbon footprint comparison between Switzerland and the Bitcoin network.
But people get this is another rabbit hole that I just recently wrote another article, like my third or fourth on this subject, because it's so tiresome, the environmental FUD around Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Because that's what journalists see. They see that it takes up as much energy as a small country, and they don't get how the thing works. The thing is, the energy is not wasted; it's sacrificed in a way, and you couldn't make the system more effective. It could not take up lesser energy by using another mining algorithm. It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. Spending energy is the whole point. That's what makes the system work. And do you want me to do the entire environmentalism banter here?
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to get into that dispelling of that FUD a little bit, and I know that you'd be able to shoot holes through that, because to me, when I look at it, I see it as like, it uses a lot of energy, but there's something to it that is this is what's going to push us and incentivize us much greater to reach a renewable energy, clean energy, because people will need to mine and to remain profitable. You can't just plug it into your wall and use the coal-powered electricity. You've got to find a way to do it for cheaper. And so I think that, in an interesting way, it potentially could be a way to solve the energy crisis. But I'll let you take it from there. I'll let you.
Yeah, not in the way people think, because like the first and foremost thing in that is that if we have sound money, if we were operating under a sound money system, so the prices of everything became lower and lower each day. We would each be, and we knew that our Bitcoins were the most precious things we owned. Mm-hmm. We would be much more careful with our money. All of us would be. But right now, we have all of us have incentives to spend our money quickly and to take out loans and buy things that we don't really need and not plan ahead a lot. With Bitcoin, it's the complete opposite of that. It will mean that we will become richer and richer and richer, but at the same time, we'll be incentivized to save for the future instead of spend frivolously on things we don't need. Mm-hmm. So the only investments left, like each buy or each transaction we make with Bitcoin, better be well thought through. And people will realize this more and more the more time passes. So right now, people are trading Bitcoin for whatever, and there's quite trading volumes are high. But in the future, I believe there will be very few Bitcoin transactions. Mm-hmm. One part of that is that the fees will be too high to make on-chain transactions. Of course, there's a Lightning Network and everything, and we can still have cheap transactions. But that's not the point. You would want your Bitcoin to stay where they are and not spend them. You're incentivized to save them at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. We will, as a species, we will be less wasteful and more thoughtful over time.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing with the energy usage, just as you said, people will look for the miners will always look for cheaper and cheaper energy sources, and not cheaper through political meddling like subsidies and stuff, but truly cheaper. And furthermore, like historically, power plants have had a geographical boundary. Like you had to buy to build the power plant quite close to a civilized area, because there's a great energy loss whenever you send electricity over vast distances.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of waste there. But with Bitcoin, you can build them wherever you want, and you can store them in. You can attach a Bitcoin miner to the power plant, and use Bitcoin as a form of battery for the energy, a mathematical battery or a value battery or whatever you may call it. Instead of sending the electricity, you can just store it as Bitcoin and use those Bitcoins somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to, there's a new use case for electricity, basically, which is just the thought of a new use case for electricity is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And most of these concepts are mind-blowing once you start thinking about them. And the other thing is like renewables. The one of the main problems with the renewables is that they don't provide us a steady stream of electricity like a nuclear plant does or whatever. But they provide, like, wind farms produce a lot of energy on windy days and no energy at all if there's no wind. And the same goes for solar panels. So like if the sun's up,
then it's great. If it's a cloudy day, then
if there's a snowstorm, you get no, or like a rain, whatever storm, you get nothing out of them. But with Bitcoin, you could, instead of just wasting the excess energy from renewables, you could store it. So you could have a miner connected at all these places, at all the wind farms and all the solar plants, and just convert whatever energy that can't be stored or transported. You can now store it mathematically. You store it in Bitcoin. So, which means you can build the power plants anywhere, and you can use up all the energy you want, or all the energy you produce. You can actually make use of all of it. And this, I truly believe that at some point in a not too distant future, this will drive it will drive the energy revolution forward like nothing else.
I mean, as much as people want to be incentivized by saving the planet, if you make it profitable to do it, then then, like you said, with the game theory and everything, all the incentives align.
Yeah, exactly. And but this is not the only. Game theory is a big field, and there's a lot of game theory in Bitcoin, and it's not only the incentives for miners that play a role, but like, for instance, if the sooner you hop onto the Bitcoin train, the better off you are, right? Because the earlier you get in, the more you profit. And as soon as big corporations realize this, which they have started doing, like MicroStrategy and Tesla and so on, and PayPal.
Even Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary just allocated 3% of his from Shark Tank. Allocated. I think Pomp had been talking to him, and he was at one point like against Bitcoin, and now he was like, "All right, I'm going to put 3% of my portfolio behind it." Yeah,
and those that don't hop onto this train are early on. Like, the earlier you are, the better off you are in the long run. And it moves so fast. The price moves so fast. So like slowly at first, and then suddenly, yeah.
Are you a believer then in the plan B, stock to flow?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I think all predictions of all market predictions and all technical analysis in this well, they can be better and worse, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But the notion that Bitcoin's price will exactly follow a curve that some guy wrote on a paper is not an idea I subscribe to at all, unfortunately. Plan B seems like a nice guy and a clever guy, but so nothing bad about him. But I just don't believe in the model. First and foremost, because value is a subjective thing, and we subjectively value stuff. And like Michael Saylor said in some interview, like if one of these billionaires decides to allocate, like if Bezos, for instance, decided to use 50% of his $200 billion to buy Bitcoin, all the models would be destroyed.
Yeah, that's
not only because of him, but because of the backlash from that. So when I say I don't believe in the stock to flow model, I
it's not the theory behind stock to flow. It's just once somebody pours money in.
I believe in the concept of stock to flow. I think it's very well documented that that's actually a mechanism that works. It's just basically supply and demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So. But the model, I think it could underestimate what Bitcoin can do.
Mm-hmm. So you think it could potentially go even higher? And I do tend to agree with you in what you're saying is like, am I correct in picking this up that, the price is relative, obviously, and based on however we value it. But and I think I saw that quote where Michael Saylor said, like, what happens if these billionaires just pour money in, like all of a sudden everything that everybody's been predicting is off the table.
Exactly, but you can follow this thought vector even further.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a video with Joni Appelberg and Guy Swan about this too, called Bitcoin's price curve will not be S-shaped. And in that video, I tried to explain one of these cycles in Bitcoin will be the last cycle. And when that happens, we enter into a scenario called hyper-Bitcoinization, which is basically the opposite of hyperinflation. Mm-hmm. So that's not when the value of money goes to zero, but when the value of money goes to infinity. And this is a very hard thing to wrap your head around, but the basic theory is this: every network technology follows an S-shaped adoption when they get global reach. So the television, the telephone, the internet, Facebook, Google, whatever, they all had S-shaped adoption. So first nothing happened, and then all of a sudden a steep rise in the curve, and it leveled out in the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this will happen to Bitcoin too. Adoption-wise, but
not price.
That's not. No, the price follows another pattern, because if everyone in the world starts just accumulates a few Bitcoin, very soon that leads to those Bitcoin being worth more than anything else that person owns.
Mm-hmm.
And then they quickly realize that they need to pour in even more of their savings into Bitcoin until everything is in Bitcoin. But it doesn't stop there. Even if everyone in the world was using nothing but Bitcoin and kept their savings in nothing but Bitcoin and transacted in nothing but Bitcoin, that means we've reached a point where we have a fully functional, politics-free, interventionism-free, inflation-free, global sound money free market system, which means that the production costs and imagine every company in the world competing with completely undiluted rules of the game. This is like the division of labor on steroids. Everyone in the world will be doing the best person will be doing the best person at each task will be doing that task, and just propelling. And combine that with the developments in AI and everything, and the prices of everything will go to zero. The transportation costs of everything will go to zero. So we will live in a truly abundant world where everything is accessible for everyone who owns but a tiny fraction of a Bitcoin. And there's no end point to this. So that's why I say that the Bitcoin price will have a J shape. Mm-hmm. First, it will eat all the money in the world, and then the dollar becomes obsolete, and it becomes pointless to speak of the Bitcoin price in dollars anymore, because there's no.
If they keep printing,
as I said, it's hard to wrap your head around where this could lead, and we don't know the time frame, but this could play out over 1,000 years, over 100 years, or over 10 years. We don't know.
I hope 10.
I'm not sure. I hope 10.
Do you think that'd be too volatile?
Too violent, maybe.
Geopolitically.
The thing is, it could destabilize societies a lot. But the thing to remember there is that societies would have been destabilized anyway with under the current system. Because all the technologies are deflationary, and all the monetary technologies, except for Bitcoin, are inflationary. So we artificially pump up prices, even though everything should be approaching zero cost. Do
you think, the U.S.? I mean, for the longest time, it was the debt that we owe to China. Like, that's a big problem. And, with all this printing, I mean, I'm not an economist, but I'm like, are they trying to print to the point where the amount of money that they owe China is worthless? Like, if they just keep flooding the market with dollars, then all of a sudden that debt.
But China is playing the same game.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all Venezuelans. We're all following the same path as Venezuela, Lebanon, or Turkey. All our currencies are going to shit. It's just a matter of time. It's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
The oldest currency in the world is the British pound, also called the pound sterling, because at some point in time you could apparently exchange it for silver, a pound of silver. And the British pound has been around for a couple of hundred years, and it has lost 99.5% of its original value, which is mind blowing. And it's just like you can buy a bag of 100 plastic toy pennies, costs $3.50 on average, which is. Like the plastic fake pennies are worth more than the original pennies. What the hell is that all about? It's just when you start to think about these things, it's insane. It's insanity, and that's why people often call Bitcoiners a Bitcoin cult, and they think we're religious, and they think we're like our own little club of cultists. But the truth is, the rest of the world is a cult. We're the only ones trying to break out of the cultish behavior we've been like everyone's.
We're the ones that, I mean,
hypnotized.
It's like breaking the hypnosis. And then even if you look at, from a movie perspective, it's kind of similar. Everybody talks about the orange pill, and there's the red pill, blue pill, orange pill for Bitcoin. But it is a very accurate, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to look around at everything around you, and you're like, oh wow, this is a lot of this is not what I thought it was. You know, and it kind of shakes you to your core a little bit. At some point, you're like, I don't know if most people go through this, but I got like terrified at one point, like, oh my God, this has all been a lie. You know,
it probably should be. Yeah, because but there are hints everywhere. If you see what politicians talk about, and if you really listen to it, and like no one's addressing any important issue at all. Mm-hmm. It's all cosmetics, and it's all about bullshit issues that affects only a tiny part of the population in every country. Mm-hmm. This is all politics are like that.
They're just doing their stump speech to try and get, you know, to boost their numbers and yeah. You know, the comedian Bill Burr, actually, I heard him say one time, he said,
I love him.
Yeah, he said that it's like buying 2 tickets at the racetrack for the same horse, you know, voting.
Yeah.
I've been telling people, I mean, you know, I don't, you know, personally like Donald Trump, but I've been telling people the only thing that did endear me towards him really was the fact that it was for the first time somebody that wasn't part of the government, you know, the big conglomerate, because and this is one of the things I was, you know, hoping to bring up with you, because I think you and I share a lot of the similar beliefs in this, is that as I started to look back, I'm like, oh my God, you know, it doesn't matter if it's Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush before him, Reagan, Carter, all the way back. They're all the same. It's the same group.
Bush and Obama are a good example, because the crisis of 2008, they decided together. The Bush administration and the Obama administration came to the same conclusion: we need to bail out the banks. Yeah, in order to prevent a short-term catastrophe. And what they did by doing that is ensuring that a larger catastrophe would happen at some point in the future, but it wouldn't affect them because their careers would be over by then.
Oh yeah, they're kicking the can down the road.
They're kicking the can down the road, and they do that because they have no incentives to plan for the future. That's the a monarchy, a monarch, a king, a hereditary ruler in a feudal system has an incentive to plan for the next generation. Mm-hmm. A democratic leader does not. Then again, if you get a crappy king, you're stuck with him for probably your own lifetime, because he will still be alive while you're alive, and then you're fucked anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's not a good system. Democracy is not a good system because it incentivizes politicians to think about their careers first and foremost, and they're out after 4 years, so who cares?
Yeah,
and they can be populists. They're all populists, by the way.
Yeah, they're all.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be so popular.
yeah, and you know, that's a really good point. And I forget whose podcast it was on. It might have been on Peter McCormick's, when you were talking about, you know, collectivism versus, you know, wins, and why collectivism wins in democracy. And I couldn't agree more. You know, and seeing these career politicians that like, one of the things I thought it was interesting to see the juxtaposition. I don't know how closely you followed the U.S. election, but Lindsey Graham, you know, I'm a big proponent of term limits, and I hate these career senators that, like, they become a senator and I'm just going to do that for 30 years. You know, like, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. That's not exactly what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like a public service that you stepped away and you did it as a public service, then went back to the private sector. And so on election night, you know, like this election battle is brewing, and the numbers are tight, and it's like his party is potentially going to win the presidency, but it's up in the air. And he won his seat, and it was like the first time he might have lost his seat in years. And they cut to his interview, and he's like, by golly, I'm so excited, you know, and like, you could just see the relief on his face, where he was like, oh my God, I thought I was gonna have to do something else in my life. You know, I thought I was gonna have to do something other than sit in this power. And that's when you can kind of see it's like they're populist. It's all about them. It's all about, retaining their power and they don't really even care about people in their own party as long as they remain in power.
No, and there's no way of stopping the apparatus from becoming bigger and bigger every year. And this happens in every democracy until there's a revolution, because all democracies head in that direction, because it gets more and more expensive to maintain all the institutions and to maintain all the political programs, because everything political needs to be tax funded or inflation funded, which is basically the same thing. Inflation is taxation without legislation. And so
we saw what happened when that last time that was a mantra.
Yeah. And
that was what led the U.S. to the revolution against Great Britain.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And these stimulus checks, like Donald Trump, who is supposedly not in the political elite, he gave out stimulus checks, like lockdown lot of businesses, a lot of people without any other social security nets, just pulling the rug out from under their feet and giving them stimulus checks. Now, where have I seen that before? I grew up before the Berlin Wall fell, and this is like Soviet Union stuff. So the supposed greatest capitalist in the world and the most greedy businessman leader who's pro free market is behaving like a communist in my point of view.
Well, yeah,
and I know I wouldn't get a lot of popularity points for saying this in Sweden, calling Donald Trump a communist.
Oh, they love him in Sweden.
No, they don't. The Swedish media is skewed to the left like nothing else. There's when they do polls here about what we would have voted if we were Americans, the Democrats always win with 95%.
Oh wow. Well, like you said, the supposed free market, and the more I dug into this rabbit hole of inflation and Jeff Booth, like he pointed out, same thing you did, where it was like, why does your house go up in value? And I thought of it like, wait a minute. Yeah. They always say the moment you buy a car, when you drive it off the lot, it instantly starts depreciating in value. So why doesn't that happen to your house? And then I started thinking about how did Trump build his fortune? And it was from real estate going up in value. And I was like, well, maybe he isn't as good as everybody thinks he is at, he's good at playing he recognized the system, I guess, and was like, okay, this is the way that I can profit from it. But it doesn't mean that, like Jeff said, the best way in the future, whenever Bitcoin takes over, is the only way to make money is to provide value. Yeah. Not just to sit on something and let it appreciate in value.
No, and I think Donald Trump is, if anything, he's a hint at how little democracy really works. Because no sane person would ever want Donald Trump as his leader.
Yeah, right.
I just don't buy that. I mean, of course, the actual policies are more important than his personality, but no sane person would think that that's the best candidate for running a country.
Yeah.
Of course, the same can be said for Joe Biden or anyone else. But
what makes you wonder?
I think the problem is not Donald Trump. The problem is democracy itself.
What do you see as a solution for that?
I see Bitcoin as a solution for that.
So Bitcoin becomes the governance of the world?
Sooner or later, governments will be obsolete, and they will be made obsolete by Bitcoin. because this is like the rebels against the Empire in Star Wars.
You were speaking my language. I usually have a Star Wars shirt on, but today it's Nirvana.
Yeah, that's another thing that got diluted. Star Wars.
Oh God, I could literally go for hours about that, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a gang rape of epic proportions. Anyway, when you get into Bitcoin and when you really learn how to use it, and more people will, you can avoid taxes, and you can move to more friendly jurisdictions with your Bitcoin stored in your head. Mm-hmm. And early Bitcoiners are quite likely to do so, because early Bitcoiners are mostly people who think out of the box already, because you sort of need to be that kind of person in order to get this thing. Mm-hmm. And it helps to have a libertarian mindset. It helps to be curious and to be adventurous and a risk taker. Mm-hmm. Of course, to even get this thing at this point, and especially a couple of years back, and that means that all the Bitcoiners will move to more friendly jurisdictions, which in turn leads to those jurisdictions becoming more and more wealthy and thus more and more powerful. More and more Bitcoiners will be more wealthy, and at some point we can buy lobbyists. At one point we can buy armies. Governments will slowly but surely fade away. This is like the governments of the world are Blockbuster Video 15 years ago.
Yeah, and they don't
trying to sell DVDs.
And do you think they realize it yet?
No, of course not. And they will be the last ones to realize it.
They'll be sitting in their ivory tower with nobody.
Yeah, they're
around them,
Fujifilm or Blockbuster Video. That's our governments today. Because people like the free market is a natural process. Like animals do trade.
Yeah, they
trade with each other. It's deeply embedded in every one of us. And a trade doesn't happen if both parties don't benefit from it. Mm-hmm. Because then it's by definition not a trade anymore, but an act of violence. I mean, human beings have two ways of resolving conflict, and one is speech and one is violence. That's the only two tools we have. And in a way, transactions are speech. That's what they are. They are expressions of value. And Bitcoin it's a perfect example of this, because Bitcoin is just code and mathematics. Mm-hmm. So it should be protected by the First Amendment in the USA.
Not much is protected by that right now.
Code is speech, and if it isn't, that's a hint that you don't really have free speech. If you don't have free trade, you don't have free speech. So in a way, if you have taxes, there's no free speech. If you have inflation, there's no free speech. Mm-hmm. Like it all depends on how you choose to frame this. And the thing with Bitcoin is when everyone can store any amount of wealth in their heads or on a piece of paper, or like where
that's true freedom.
In a multitude of ways, there will be. They're very hard to confiscate by using force. Of course, you can put a gun to a family member's head and say, "Give me all your Bitcoin," and I give you some of my Bitcoin, and you walk away with them, and everything's fine. But how are you going to find out how many Bitcoin I have?
Yeah,
there's simply no way to do that. Mm-hmm. And like there are so many things with this knowing is owning concept that is. Like it's the best tool for disarming violent people we have, and governments are basically violent people. They have they're the gang that has monopoly on violence in every mm-hmm. country. They're very much like a mafia or a cult.
Yeah. Well,
these are. If you really think about it, this is a conclusion you can come to. And like, of course, I too live in an organized society in a country, and I have my thoughts here, and I express them to you. But of course, I live and operate in the system we all live and operate under,
because we have to. Yeah.
So my deeper thoughts are not entirely reflected in my actions.
Well, yeah, because you have to pay taxes, and
But the more I get into Bitcoin, the more that line gets blurred.
Well, and like you said, where Bitcoiners are going to move, we've seen a lot of people leaving California, and even my one of my business partners, he left California. He's originally from Texas, but just moved back to Texas. Because, there are multiple reasons, they can't go outside in California. But also the tax rate is much different. And I think that's something, it's like, who would be the country? I'd be intrigued to see, like, in 100 years from now, who's the country that's going to come out and say, hey, like, we're, completely pro Bitcoin, and we want to be, they're not maybe a global power at the moment, but if they fully adopt it and run with it, they could.
But then they have no purpose. No,
the government doesn't. Yeah.
No, there's no purpose for a government in such a place. So, and that's the beauty of it, because this is the only force pulling democracies in the other direction. The only force to count on, and like pushing governments to shrink again and not just expand all the time.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only thing. Yeah. An anti-bureaucracy tool, or whatever you may call it.
Have you ever watched the show Parks and Recreation?
No, I know about it, but I haven't watched it.
Well, there's the character on it, Ron Swanson, and he's like a stark libertarian. And I've been telling people myself for a long time. They say, where do your politics lie? And I'm like, I'm kind of like closer to Ron Swanson than I am anything, where I think the government's just a complete waste of taxpayer dollars, and, blah, blah, blah. And, we need small government. And my wife asked me, she said, whenever I told her who I was interviewing, because she's not big into the Bitcoin world or anything. And I said, the best way I could describe it is he is the Bitcoin Ron Swanson. And she was like, oh, well, this is going to be right up your alley. I said, yeah, definitely. But what do you, how do you solve that problem of, the government needing things? Like I heard, when you were talking to Peter McCormick talking about, how do you solve needing ramps and stuff like that. My thought, just to give you my thought before, but I think that you at that point are relying on, you said the free market, could determine that, but I also think that in general people are good, and I think that there's a lot of good in the average person. And I think that, the average people will, and Bitcoiners are also very, very charitable and very giving and welcoming.
But people are good and bad.
Oh yeah.
But the thing Bitcoin does is it makes it harder for people to be bad.
Yeah.
Because you can't steal stuff as easily any longer. So that's the thing. And like with the politics thing, it's like refuse to play their game. That's like you don't need to play their game. There are lots of other games to play, and funnier ones.
Yeah,
and you don't have to go all in. And this is the thing that people misinterpret about Bitcoin too. They think you become a Bitcoiner and that's what you do. And
yeah.
Well, it tends to get to you, but you can still choose what level. You can opt out of other stuff too, like not using Bitcoin. Like yeah, like I haven't watched TV or mainstream media news for over 20 years.
Oh wow. I thought I was doing good. I'm like 7 years, but you're much better.
But so you can opt out of whatever things they try to put in your head. Like, who said that? That's a Terry Pratchett quote. I love a good quote. Mm-hmm. The problem with an open mind is that people will come along and try to put stuff in it.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Well, and I love so the Fox News, I don't even know if it's still this, but I remember seeing the Fox News, which is right leaning in America. Their slogan was "We report, you decide," and I was like, "Come on, like, okay, you were actually reporting and letting the people decide." Whereas, that I think that's a thing that kills me is the media manipulation with everything, and even like my parents were talking to me, I'm 35 years old and they said, oh, they're like, we're really worried about COVID. And I said, you shouldn't worry about it for me. And they were like, well, I heard on the news that there was a 35-year-old that got it and had a terrible reaction and died. And I just looked at them and I said, yeah, but there's a 35-year-old that died from the flu every year.
Yeah.
I said, you just didn't hear about it, it's
the
fear
COVID
campaign.
thing. We could go down that path, but let's skip that because it's
a hot button issue. But no,
everyone's tired of the fucking virus and the fucking lockdown. So the funny thing about Fox News is like 10 years ago, I remember Fox News being the loony channel, like the most obviously bought channel in America.
Uh-huh.
And you like what was an ad and what was actual news, you couldn't really tell the difference. With Bill O'Reilly and people like that, just being completely redneck, red state, hyper Christian, super conservative types. But nowadays it's like the other way around. The liberal or supposed democratic channels on US TV are like, they're the ones that are obviously bought these days, and Fox News seems like is like the more sound voice these days. So, but I think it's all just bought nowadays. It's like there's no middle ground anywhere, and there's like journalists these days are bloggers with hubris. That's all they are. It's completely interesting to me what they say and what they choose to say and what subjects they choose to talk about.
So do you think there's Bill Burr said this in his one stand-up, so if you like him, you'll probably remember it, where he talked about he said, like he thinks there's a group of people that meet and they all sit there and talk about like how they're going to run the world. And he said, don't you think they sit there and they go, how can we eliminate the rest of the population? And he said, what if we slowly cook them at airports? Just have them go through a microwave machine every time they get on a plane. And I was like, I like laughed at that. And then like, as time has gone on, I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe that's kind of true.
Sort of what they're doing.
Yeah. Like maybe that's, they're certainly not going to be fans of Bitcoin. That's for sure. The libertarian mindset, I think I started to a little bit become, libertarian, and I'm very careful with the labels. Like you said, on podcasts before, I've heard you say where, like it can change so quickly.
Language is a dangerous thing.
But I would say freedom. And one of the things I wanted to get your opinion on is how do we get out of this situation we're in the world where like I don't care what my neighbor does at all. Like as long as my neighbor isn't harming anyone, like you do you, I'll do me, and like let's just not get in each other's business, and it's this really weird world now where like, everybody has to have a political stance. And like,
and it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. It's like, every athlete, what their stance is. Every actor, every comedian, it's like, and I would love to go my entire life without anybody being able to pinpoint what my political beliefs are, because I don't ever want to be in a tribe. But like, there's just so much tribalism, and how do we get out of that? Where, why do we
don't
have
play
to
their game? That's the trick. Don't play their game. As much as you can, try to not play their game.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Bitcoin's a good start.
And Star Wars actually kind of plays into that, because I thought that the new Star Wars movies were complete garbage, and and all of a sudden that became like a racist, sexist thing to say, where it was like, if you didn't agree, and it was like, I was like, what is going on? Like, it used to be like, don't talk about religion and politics, but now it's like, please do talk about politics at the dinner table. But if you bring up Star Wars, my God, you are. It's
people are getting tired of references to 1984, but I think it's such a brilliant book. George Orwell, like the police force there is called the Ministry of Love, and how brilliant is that? and war is peace, and love is hate, and all of this. The words have lost their meaning completely. At some point in time, it became racist to not categorize people by race.
Like
what the hell happened? We were so close to like not giving a fuck about race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then all of a sudden we focused about
everything is defined by it now. It's like I truly.
The same goes for gender equality. It's the same thing. All these identity politics games, they're so stupid. But here you have the Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows if it was a he or she, if it was a hetero or homo or whatever other varieties you can think of. Nobody knows race or ethnicity or religious affiliation. Nothing. Politics. Nothing. You don't know what the guy is or the girl or the.
That's so important.
Yeah, and it's a perfect example of. The person doesn't matter. The idea matters. Ideas matter.
Yeah,
like that's the thing that propels us forward, and that's what we should focus on. And Bitcoin is a meritocracy and not a democracy, and it's a much better system. Like if you have something if you can actually contribute something, you'll get rewarded for it. So, and not only the developers, but like Bitcoin rewards long-term thinking and
planning,
being better. Like it's a motivational tool, like nothing else.
Yeah. I will. And just so you know, I am making a documentary called "Searching for Satoshi," but I want you to know, and I have to keep clarifying this with people that. Because it's a misleading title, but it's part of the intrigue. I'm not actually. I think it's better to not find Satoshi, and the movie is not actually attempting to find Satoshi. But it's kind of the metaphor of like, who is Satoshi, all that kind of stuff. But I did when building this idea out and everything. I shared it on Twitter. I don't know if you saw, but I was like, I think there's a 1% chance that Satoshi's from the future, because it's the only way that it makes sense. It came out at the right time and works so perfectly, and it's like everything has seemed to fall in line.
Yeah.
And like every time I think about it, I'm like, oh, like, man, that would be so cool. That'd be I'm a movie maker. So it's like, man, that'd be a great movie. Somebody sending it from the future to the past and saving us from, the galactic empire that's going to take over one day. That's I don't know if
my money is on Hal Finney.
Mine too. If I had to pick one person, but I think that, like you said, it's important for it to not be one person. And I think that goes to show you as to why we'll never find out who Satoshi is.
And if Satoshi should suddenly show up and start using Bitcoin and start saying stuff, I think we're past the point where we give a crap about what that entity would tell us about it.
Yeah,
because Bitcoin is very far from what it was when Satoshi left.
Yeah.
So I think not even that is a risk in 2021.
Yeah, at this point,
he could return and spend 1 million Bitcoins, and the headlines would be big, but Bitcoin would still work.
Yeah, Bitcoin's become so much more. So I'll let you.
And it's not Craig Stephen Wright. That's about the only person that it isn't.
No, and like I've said to people that it's more likely that Satoshi is from the future than it's Craig Wright. I would put money on that before I would put it on Craig, because he wouldn't come out and say it. It wouldn't. It's not important. He obviously understood the importance of the anonymity. Not just for himself, but for the network, him or herself. So I think we're, beyond that. I do have a question to ask before we run here. I did my best. Pittsburgh is a very sports centric town. So I do my best to avoid bringing up sports at all costs, because I find from being from Pittsburgh, you could bring up sports in any conversation. It's like you could steer it towards sports. But somebody did on Twitter respond and ask who your favorite hockey player was. And I thought, well, okay, there is something, because you're from Sweden, and we had the Pittsburgh Penguins recently won 2 Stanley Cups back to back. And we had Carl Hagelin and Patrick Hornquist were big parts of that. We were both, Swedes. So I am curious, who is your favorite hockey player? Because Sweden has a long history of great hockey.
Yeah. I can answer this question when we're not recording anymore.
Okay.
Because I'm doxing a lot of things if I tell you what my favorite hockey player is. Because first of all, I don't give a shit about hockey.
Okay.
Never did. Or I tried, but I just can't. I just can't seem to care about sports. I try to follow a soccer game or a football game or a hockey game, but I get bored with it. I've been to 2 NHL games in Tampa, and
cool.
I walked out of both of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I just couldn't stand it. Too much noise. And too many people, too much noise.
Yeah, there's a lot of the production of all the music and everything, and it's a little much nowadays. Do you want me to cut out the part where I said Sweden?
No problem. People know I'm from Sweden.
Okay. But, yeah, you don't want to dox yourself any further. No, I
no, and I don't want to dox anyone else in here. I'll tell you the story afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Thanks again.
Now all of a sudden it's mysterious, and people might try to figure out who it is. So either way, I'm fucked.
Well, that's really funny. That makes sense as to why that question was asked, because, I thought, I was like, well, I guess somebody wants to know because he's from Sweden. And I mean, Sweden won the gold medal in 2006, I think. And they
something
had
like that.
And there was
we have a lot of good.
The great Peter Forsberg moment where he was on the stamp.
Yeah. He's one of the. He's one of the greats, right?
Yeah.
Mats Sundin and Peter Forsberg were really good back then.
Yeah.
Even I remember their names.
Even you remember, yeah. So that must mean they were pretty good. Well, Knut, thank you so much for coming on. This is a great discussion, and I think this will be very valuable to a lot of people that are new in the Bitcoin world.
You're just finishing up now because you want to know what the hockey player.
Do you want to keep going? I can keep going.
No, it's fine. I think this is quite a good time to end this. Actually,
yeah, I do want to know the hockey player though. But yeah, that is. So all right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks again to Knut for coming on and joining me. I really enjoyed his insight, and explanations of different things with Bitcoin, but also, understanding how it can, develop into something that can potentially keep us free from any kind of tyrannical reign or governments or anything like that. And I also appreciate Knut for sharing with me who his favorite hockey player is. I am sworn to secrecy on that one, so I will not be sharing. But thanks again, everybody, for listening. And as always, tune in next time, and I will talk to you then.